Hi everyone, Dr. Jim here. Like most of you, I'm socially distanced, working from home, and making the best of it. But as a family, we're actually thriving. And I'd like to share with you today some of the positive things that can be taken from this unprecedented time in history. If you take the Chinese word for crisis and look at it, it's actually made up of two different symbols. The first one being the symbol for danger, and the second one being the symbol for opportunity. We're getting plenty of the danger part of this crisis shoved down our throats with the virus, right? We're all going to die. The economy's crashing, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to take a few minutes today and talk about the opportunity part of this crisis. Specifically, this is a perfect time for you to refocus your family culture. You're in isolation with one another, thinking about the things that are truly most important. You can really make the most of this time. And this is perfect because, let's face it, family life is really, really hard, and probably never more so than now. It took me 8 years to get my doctoral degree. It took my sister-in-law a similar amount of time to get through med school. Navy SEALs, they never stop training. And yet there's almost no training for marriage and family life. There's no certification, there's no degree. Anyone can just go get it. Anyone can become it. And yet it's a lot harder to be a parent than it is to go to work. It's a lot easier for me to go to work Monday mornings than it is for me to organize my kids' chores on Saturday mornings. It's very tricky. It's very challenging. There's a lot of nights I go to bed at night and I think, man, I did a pretty good job at work today. But I can't think of the last time I went to bed and thought, I was an awesome parent today. It's the hardest thing there is to do. It's so challenging. It's so tough. And in family life, we've got just a million forces pulling us apart at any given moment. There's bills to pay, diapers to change, activities to drive through, careers to build. The list goes on and on and on. The second law of thermodynamics says that basically the universe is moving from a state of order to a state of chaos. And nowhere is that more true than in family life, right? Now, combating this is going to take real intentionality. It can't possibly happen on its own. The problem is, most of us know this, but we don't know how to do it. And it's never quite urgent enough, right? I'd love to talk with my wife about how we can connect with the kids better, but first we got to talk about the taxes. Or we'd love to prioritize having dinners together as a family, but we just have so many activities to drive through, it's just not all that practical. But think about this for a second. Who do you think is a happier person? A person with a rich and rewarding career, but a mediocre family life? Or a person who has a mediocre career, but has a rich and rewarding family life? There's a lot of rich guys out there who commit suicide because they realize that achievement did not bring them the happiness that they thought it was going to. But you'd be hard pressed to find a guy who is happily married and loves his children off himself because he got passed up for that big promotion. It's just not going to happen, right? So this crisis is an opportunity for us to reflect on the fundamental truth that we all know, but we struggle to live out. Imagine if we took this time of social distancing and isolation and we focused on the things that are most important. Thinking about how we can have closer relationship with God. Thinking about how we can be more intentional about our marriage and family life. If everyone does that, we're going to emerge from this crisis a much stronger world, a much stronger culture. And so with that, I'd like to share with you just a few points to reflect on so that when we come out of our caves once this crisis is over, you guys could be stronger, more tightly knit families. I'm going to start with marriage. This might sound like a very countercultural thing to say in today's egalitarian culture, but family life is indeed a hierarchy. Mom and dad are at the top and the kids are lower down. And this sounds like blasphemy to a lot of parents. Oh, I love my children. I would do anything for my children. I would die for my children. Yes, that's all true. I would do the same things. But when mom and dad, when the marriage is at the top of the hierarchy, it's best for everyone. And let me tell you why. The number one thing that kids need is a loving and connected, secure environment. If a child grows up in a loving home but has nothing else, that child is going to be so much better off than a kid who grows up in a home that maybe has literally everything else, but not a secure and loving home. It's the best gift you can possibly give to your children, way more important than any activity, any college you can send them to, anything else you could possibly provide them. Now, intuitively, we know this, but we struggle to make it happen. The security and love that a child needs stems from the love shared between parents. That's actually where it starts. It's not just about me as a father giving affection to my children. The affection that I have for my wife is contagious and spreads to my whole family. So if you prioritize your relationship with your spouse, you're going to be working together better as a family unit. You're going to have so much more energy, so much more focus. I can think of a million times when my wife and I have gotten stuck on some big argument, and it takes 8 hours and there's no resolution. And then we'll go on a date, we'll feel connected. The next day we'll sit down and it'll take 5 minutes to solve it. That love and connection, that bond, is so empowering, and it spills over into the rest of the family. Now, unfortunately, this does not work nearly as well in reverse. If you focus on loving your children, it doesn't necessarily translate into then love for your spouse. In fact, it makes it harder to stay connected. It can burn you both out if all of your time and all of your energy is being focused into the little ones. But how easy is it in family life to get this hierarchy flipped upside down? We're always focused on the kids, and rightly so, of course, to a large degree. But it should not come at the neglect of our relationship with our spouse. It should never come at the neglect of our marriage. Now, we get a lot of pushback from parents on this point. We live in this culture where there's a lot of pressure. There's the 3 C's that parents deal with: competition, criticism, and comparison. You're out there comparing yourself all the time to the other parents. Well, Johnny's, he's only doing baseball once a week, but the other family, they've got activities 5 days a week. They're so much more loving. They're so much better. We have so much competition in our culture. Forget that. Especially in our families, in our Catholic families, oftentimes when we have more children, we can't keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. We can't have our kids in a million different activities. Imagine if you have 5 kids and 5 activities, you're going to go crazy. Now, C.S. Lewis said that when you put first things first and second things second, you're going to get more out of the second thing than you would if you put it first. So when we put marriage first and children second, actually the children have immense benefit from us doing that. A mom and dad who love each other really is the best gift that you can give to your child. So, if you're a spouse and you're under the same roof 24/7 right now, I'd encourage you to have some heart-to-hearts about this stuff. There's a lot of people out there who I know are really struggling. If you struggle in your marriage and maybe you don't like each other a whole lot, having some of these talks with one another is really hard. Maybe you feel guilty. Forget about guilt. Just focus on what you can do. Talk about it. Take the bull by the horns and have these conversations that can really be life-changing for your whole family. It's worth the effort. The next thing I want to talk about is your family's identity. After a loving relationship with mom and dad, after passing on the faith, probably the next best thing that you can give them is a sense of family identity. You're probably at home isolated with your nuclear family right now. You're not interacting with a whole lot of other people. Obviously, that's not a very good long-term solution in life, but it gives you a chance to have conversations about things that maybe you don't always get to talk about. Talking about the things that your family stands for, what's most important to you guys. But first, before you can talk about it with your kids, you have to understand what it is for yourselves. What is most important for you in your family? What are your own personal values? Another countercultural thought that I have is that children, they don't discover their identities on their own. They don't discover their values on their own. That's not how we discover things. You don't find yourself by going off to some desert island and discovering yourself. That's not how it works. It gets passed on. Mom and dad reflect the child's value, reflect God's love to the child in that relationship. That's how a kid figures out what they like, who they are. Kids have no idea who they are. It's our job to help them discover that. And part of that is by passing on our values to them, helping them clarify their values and thinking these things through. Why is this so important? Well, for one thing, your kids are going to download your values one way or another. They're going to internalize what you believe through osmosis. If it takes 5 years to get a PhD, your kids have probably at least one PhD in you, and they're on their way to their second or third one. Everything about you, your children soak up, and that includes your own value system. So it's important for you to take a look at it. What do you value? What is most important for you? Your value system is your recipe for happiness. And that's why this is so important. If something is important to you, that you would call it a value, it's because in some way you believe that by practicing that value, it's going to make you happier. Now, all of us have recipes for happiness, but some of our recipes are more effective than other people's recipes, and all of our recipes are imperfect. So for example, for me, my marriage is immensely important to me. I love my wife so much. It's really hard to over prioritize the marriage, but I also really love work. I love what I do. I love working hard. It's really important to me. If I let that value of hard work supersede my relationship with my wife, all of a sudden everything's going to be off kilter, and it's going to not only make me and my wife unhappy, it's going to throw the entire balance of my family out of whack. An exercise I do with couples is I have them list out their everything that they value. So I'd encourage you to just make a list of literally every value you possibly have. Try and get a list up to like 40 or more, everything that could possibly be important to you. And it probably will involve some things that are nice and holy, like passing on your faith to your children and that kind of thing. But it also ranges to the other things in life that are important. Your career, getting education, different things about your lifestyle that you want, success, fun, faith, growth. There's a whole list of things. But then I want you to narrow it down to just 5 things. We can have more than 5 things that are important to us, but I really think we can only have about 5 things that are really important to us. The word priorities in plural didn't even exist a couple hundred years ago. Priority means most important thing. How could you possibly have more than one most important thing? Well, in our American culture, leave it to us to just change the word around. Now we have multiple priorities, lots and lots of things that are important to us. And because of that, we're probably not very focused on any one thing that we do, whether it's family life or work life or anything. It's really hard to have more than one most important thing. So once you get your values narrowed down to your top 5, share them with your spouse and think about them for yourself. And I've got 5 questions I want you to ask yourself and ask your spouse. The first one is, how well do your values mesh with your spouse's? How well do they line up? If your marriage is out of sync to some degree, it probably has something to do with your value system, your list of things that are important. Getting these in sync is going to be really important. It doesn't actually mean that you have the exact same list. You can have complementary lists. The next question is, how well are you actually living these values out? Most of the time when I have couples complete this, they'll list living out their faith as being the most important thing, but then I'll challenge them a little bit and get them to think, like, how well are you actually living that whole faith thing out for yourself? Forget about comparing yourself to, so-and-so at the parish or whatever. for you, how well are you living this thing out that you say is the most important to you? The third question is, do these values actually lead to happiness? Is it making me happy? If you are, let me give you a hint, if you are constantly stressed out, always overwhelmed, you don't feel very happy, you're miserable all the time, your values aren't working for you and you need to take a look at them. It's either because your values are not leading to happiness, or you're not living out the values that you say are important to you. The next question would be, how well are you passing them on to your children? Like I said, they soak them through osmosis, but it's also important to explicitly teach them, especially when they're younger. Kids who are younger are a lot more receptive to concrete passing on of identity. So my kids could definitely quote the mantras that go in our house, like Langleys do hard things, we work hard, Langleys have fun, Langleys are silly. These concrete things get kind of internalized into them, and they embrace them as they get older. And then the last question is, given all those previous 4 questions, what adjustments do you need to make to your value systems? What's not working? What is working? What do we want to emphasize even more? What do we want to have drop off the list? If you're able to do that, you're bound to emerge as a much more joyful family. The next thing I'd like you guys to do would be taking time to talk about things that are important that you just never have time to get around to. If you're like a lot of couples, you spend most of your time talking about money, household, chores, and that sucks up most of your time, and whatever's left, you end up decompressing through Netflix. Look, those things are fine, but they're actually not the most important thing. They're not ends in themselves, right? Money and chores are actually, they just exist to support your family life. So one thing I'd encourage you to do is take time to go through your children one by one and discern together where you think they're at. What do you think they need? Where are they at in their relationship with God? Where are they at emotionally? What do they need from you guys as parents? Heck, go beyond that and look at your own yourselves. Look at the marriage. Ask the same questions about the marriage. My next point is emphasizing traditions and fun. Family life is enriched by traditions, obviously. Think back to your own life. Probably one of the first memories that would come to you would be how you guys celebrated the holidays, maybe what you did on Christmas, that kind of thing. Traditions are important because they build a continuity in your family's life. They link the past, present, and future all together. It gives such a wonderful sense of unity, not only within your little family unit, but across the ages of your family life. Now, most of you guys probably have traditions for, the big holidays and different things. I would encourage you to bring tradition into your daily life. Find ways to incorporate into just what you do every day. So, for example, my kids know, my 5 boys know that whenever it rains outside, whenever it rains hard, it doesn't matter if it's the middle of July or if it's early November, we are taking off our shirts and we're running around like wild men outside. It's an important part of what we do. I've got pictures on my desk here of documenting different times that we've gone out and done that. I'll show you one right here. This would be my 5 boys just having fun. The reason why this is so important is because it gives them something to look forward to. It gives them a sense of like, this is what we do. It gives them a sense of identity. Along similar lines is the idea of fun. So much of life feels so serious, especially as adults. As our kids get older, you'll find yourself spending most of your time talking with them about school and chores and things they should be doing and things they shouldn't be doing, and not a whole lot of time talking about fun stuff. Now, the problem is a good relationship is all about a balance of positive to negative interactions. And it's a tough ratio to master because it takes about 5 positive interactions to equal the value of 1 negative interaction. So every small positive interaction can be a little hug, it can be a compliment, it can be just noticing something about your kid. It's like a deposit in the emotional bank account. And every negative one is a withdrawal. Unfortunately, talking about lame stuff like school and chores, whether it's with your spouse or whether it's with your kids, it's a withdrawal. It's not fun. It feels like a negative thing. And so you have to work really hard, really intentionally to balance that out with more positive ones. Probably the best way to do that is simply have more fun as a family. There's no reason not to do that. It also helps you build better attachments with your kids. Taking time to have fun means you took whatever is going on in your life that just seems so important. For me, it's usually catching up on emails and phone calls and focusing on something that seems less important, like your children. Every time I put the stupid computer aside and just cuddle with one of my kids for a minute, goes so far to help them realize, that, oh yeah, they're really important. It helps my kids realize that, but probably more importantly, it helps me realize what's most important in life. The last thing I want to talk about is stress. Most families would say they're super stressed out all the time. Do you know many families who would say they're not stressed out? Stress is just a normal part of family life. With family comes chaos. That's okay. But if you find yourself constantly overwhelmed, if you're chronically stressed out, you need to take a look at that. And it's very harmful to your family life for a couple of reasons. One is stress and anxiety is contagious. If you are constantly coming home and you're spout from work, and let's say your wife is super stressed out and it happens every single day, the two of you are going to start distancing from one another. You're going to feel more and more disconnected. Same with me at work. If I'm super stressed out about my work stuff, my wife isn't really going to want to talk to me. And the stress is contagious. It spreads out from me and affects the children. This is an important point, especially during this crisis, because most of what we're thinking about and talking about is coronavirus centered. I'm so glad that the kids are home doing virtual learning right now, because they're kind of taken out of this, the environment where all anyone was talking about was the coronavirus. I would strongly encourage you, for your own self-care, to greatly limit what media you're taking in about the virus. Believe it or not, I limit myself to 5 minutes a day. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes for me to learn the basics of what I need to know. And it works. I'm actually not all that stressed out about the virus. If something is important, if I need to know something, someone's going to tell me. I don't need to be checking media every 10 minutes to see what the latest and greatest is about the virus. I can only control what is within my realm of influence, and that's what I'm going to focus on. The second reason why stress is dangerous to family life is that stress and anxiety make us divest ourselves of our relationships. If we're stressed out all the time, you're going to be less likely to want to take the time to invest in the things that matter most, because it takes effort. A study was done at Harvard where they followed the students, and they found that students who studied really, really hard, but to the neglect of everything else, did much poorer, had much higher dropout rate than kids who worked really hard, but maybe they studied in groups. They still had extracurricular activities. They still had fun. They still had relationships. Those kids were much more successful. But we have to be so intentional about counteracting our stress reactions. So as I wind down here, let's take a moment to just reflect on the real thing we're fasting from right now during this Lent of Lents, and that's the sacraments, especially the Eucharist. Most of us will have gone weeks now without receiving communion. And I'd like you to just take a moment to reflect on, what does that mean for you? I'm thinking of the state of my own soul. When I really reflect on myself, I feel a little bit more run down than normal. My nerves are frayed a little bit. I don't have as much to offer other people. I feel like God is there, but I also feel like He's giving me a glimpse of what it's like to not have Him. To have, to see what it's like when I'm more relying on myself. it's really kind of painful. It's an empty kind of feeling. But actually, my main reaction to it is gratitude. So seeing that the emptiness that's there right now gives me a better sense of what is there when I am able to receive communion, when I am receiving the sacraments. It makes me just so much more grateful. And so I'd encourage you all to just really be mindful and intentional about that particular fasting as we wind Lent down here. Embrace it, lean into it. We can do nothing for ourselves. We're completely dependent on the Lord. And because of this, gratitude should be our fundamental response to life. So thank you guys. Hang in there, and God bless you all.